ladies and gentlemen. So, first of all, it's a great personal happiness to see all of you here today, and of course to see my one of my dearest friends, Professor Ramkrishna Pradhan from India, who is now a dean of international relations at Guru Ghasidas Central University, and since I would say that since the coronavirus time, the whole architecture of the security of Eurasia have been changed, and it is still in a process of big changes. Uh, Even if we omit the question with Russian-Ukrainian conflict, as it is called somewhere, or Russian-Ukrainian war, as it is called somewhere else, still the whole Eurasia is in changes. So I'm very privileged to give the floor to my great friend, Professor Ramkrishna Pradhan, who will give the Indian perspective of the security challenges for Eurasia.
Thank you.
Ram?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Akbota. Am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you once again. A very good afternoon to all my young friends from Eurasian National University, where with the support, guidance, and everything, my friend philosopher Professor Akbota, I had been a visiting professor as well there. Met some young friends, those who became lifelong friends now, and the students, scholars, and the budding researcher from the Eurasian region. Friends, those who are joining from India, particularly my students, those who are joining from different universities where I served in India. And I must thank you all. And importantly, I must thank the platform that which was created by my dear friend, one among the closest of the friends, Professor Agbota, for providing this opportunity so that I can interact with the young minds, isn't it, who are the budding researcher on this very particular area, isn't it, on a very particular theme that we will have, discussion today, or rather say a kind of intellectual discourses where we can take things forward. Is India in the new Eurasian security architecture? Yeah, the topic, as I told you, is of course very challenging, very debating and contested, because India is very new to the Eurasian region as far as the new geopolitical dynamics are concerned. And uh, the way things are unfolding, as Professor Akbota has said, that the security landscape in Eurasia is changing and has always been changing. That has to be seen at least in three perspectives. And to begin with, I must say that the very idea of security that we discussed today is very comprehensive and, in fact, a very multifaceted concept. Therefore, to understand, to say, without deviating from the given theme of discussion, I will structure my entire lecture into three broad parameters for the lucid understanding of all the people around here. The first parameter, of course, is regionalism, and regional security complex, which very much has to do with Eurasia that we see today. The second parameter of my lecture would be the Eurasian security system and the Sino-Russian relationship therein. Because, of course, we will be discussing on India, but when we are discussing Eurasia, without Russia and China, any discussion on Eurasia would again be incomplete. Of course, the discussion on America is equally relevant even. But fact of the matter is, the way Russia and China, they came together, joined together to oust US from the geopolitical orbit of Eurasia, definitely requires or derives our attention to look into the Sino-Russian partnership in the Eurasia which leads to a new geopolitical configuration, leading to what we call as new Eurasian security architecture that largely developed after 2014. Yeah, of course, it got more aggravated during the COVID-19 period, but of course, this new architecture started around 2014, sometimes around 2014. And the third parameters of our discussion today would be on mapping India's role in Eurasian security architecture. My dear friend, as you all will agree with me, traditionally international relation, as we understand or as we know, is largely state-centric, isn't it? As a student of international politics, it was told to us that state is the be-all and end-all of international politics. It was told to us that international relations starts from the states and ends with the state. Without state, we cannot imagine international politics. And that is the reason probably why the concepts like strategy, which is strategy means an ism which advocates for the state, or state centrism rather to say, survival, self-help, national interest, they all were forwarded by the theorist of international relation, isn't it? With the same premise of putting the state in the center of international relation. So we believed, as it was told to us, isn't it? As you know, Robert Cox has long back said, every theory is for someone and every theory is some purpose. So when we study international relation, from that perspective, we realize that international relation means state. It ends with the state and begins with the state. And taking this assertion further, isn't it, of what Morgenthau had said, that international relation is state-centric, Hadley Bull, one among the renowned historians, has come up with his own, assertion that international politics is largely characterized with anarchic. He said international relation is anarchic, thus reducing the entire premise of international relation to two things. One is the state, the other is the systemic level or the world system, rather to say, or to which we call as world politics. Simply put it in a nutshell, my dear friend, because you all are young students. Two things are there in international politics. One is the state, the other is the world system, or to which Hadley Bull and Morgenthau calls it systemic level. Are you getting my point? I'm to say, if you look at these two concepts has further been cemented by Cold War international relation theorist like Kenneth Walls when he forwarded his theory of neorealism. He talked about structural problems within the international system and has asserted to address those problems in international politics amicably. And when he says structural problems, that structural problems, he says, only within the systemic level. Systemic level means in the world level. That means precisely if you look at none of the international relation theories so far told us that apart from the state and systemic level, there exists something which also factors in international politics. Simply to put forth, that means it was being told to us by all the theorists of international relation that only state exists and the states they interact at international politics. Therefore, you have two things that operates in international relation. One is the state, the other is the world system or the systemic level or international politics rather to say. Am I right? Nonetheless, no one, so we find, or no commentators in international politics so far has advocated in favor of any other factor in international relation other than the state and systemic politics. It is only with the writings of people like Berry Bhujan and further jointly between Berry Bhujan and Ole Over that the region as a factor in international politics came to public domain. And it assumed larger significance in the circle of academic lexicon when Beribuzan and Ule Weaver started replicating on, regional complex theories, or depicting the, characteristics of regional variations or regional cooperation that are taking place in different regions of the world. My dear friend, if you look, to say the regional security complex, which largely comes from regional studies, isn't it? Which further has been, to say advanced by Berry Bhujan and Ole Oiver as regional security complex, to which today we will discuss as regional security complex theories. They are of the view that any geographical region to emerge as a security complex or a regional security complex from which Eurasian security complex also emerges, isn't it? What you require is a kind of security interdependence among these countries, and the neighbors who are part of the security region, they must need to be proximate. I mean to say, the people like Beribuzan and Ole Oiver, when they talked about that apart from the state and the systemic politics, what factors in international politics is also a region that is the linking pin between the state and international politics. As traditionally it was being told to us, state directly interacts in international politics. But Beribuzan and Ole Weaver put forth that no doubt states may directly interact in international politics, but sometimes the state interacts in international politics through a third paradigm called the region, to which here we will study as a regional security complex as propounded by Beribuzan and advanced by Ole Weaver further. My dear friend, this regional security complex to take place, this regional security architecture, which Professor Akbota has given as a topic, to take further or to go further or to see further, what we need to see is that there must be a geographical region, which we see in the context of Eurasia. It's a completely unique region, a region which has its own characteristics, which cannot be visualized in other regions. Similarly, if you look at South Asia as a regional security complex or architecture, this is peculiar, unique, and a kind of security region which is not similar to any other region like Eurasia or to Europe or Africa or to say Gulf region. I mean to say every geographical region which comprises certain countries constitute a regional security complex. Am I right? In for instance, Eurasian regional security complex, isn't it? But the question comes: only a geographical entity that constitute a regional security complex, or something else is there? No. Apart from the regional security, I mean to say, apart from the geographical region, what else constitute the regional security complex is the security interdependence these countries share with each other. I mean to say, every country in the region, they have some unique security issues and concerns which is similar with other countries. That means whatever Kazakhstan might be facing may be similar to what Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, or Turkmenistan might be exhibiting as well or experiencing as well. That means the security issues and concerns must be similar. What are the next things that, I mean to say, creates a regional security complex? Many a time, the regional countries, isn't it, may not be on its own position to create a security complex. Then what happens? For example, the Central Asian countries, no doubt they have their own security concerns. No doubt they have their own security issues. But on their own, they themselves are not sufficient to develop a regional security complex, which we can very much see in the Eurasian security architecture. In that case, what happens, my dear friend? An external power penetrates into that security region, isn't it? To establish a regional security complex, if it goes into the security alignment with the local state in case, or the second alternative is it draws them into its own security alignment. Many a time what we see, and very much it fit into the Eurasian security, architecture, that many a time the regional countries, they must have a demand for regional security complex. But their economy, their geostrategic locations, their political willpower, their military might not allow them to create a regional security complex. In such a situation, what happens? The external actors, in the case of Eurasia, of course, Russia and China, the external actors who has similar security issues or similar, security concerns or challenges, they may draw these states into their strategic orbit and create a regional security complex. Or sometimes without inviting these countries, they may penetrate into the regional security concerns or complexes of the regional countries, and they may emerge as a hegemonic actor, isn't it? The case of America is well founded. The case of Russia and Eurasia, is highly in place. And recently, the way China is penetrating into Central Asia, made his inroads into Central Asia and dictating the terms and conditions to many of the countries of Central Asia can well be visualized as how external actors entering into a region's security, architecture and establishing their hegemony to dictate the regional security architecture towards their advantage. Am I right or not? These questions may be pretty tough because what I'm telling you is theoretically those narratives through which we can understand whatever is happening in the regional security architecture of Eurasian region. That's the reason I have taken back these theoretical frameworks to make you understand that how a regional security architecture is created. Many a time we believe that only our security concerns are pivotal to the regional security architecture, but the reality is not so. Many a time, the external countries, those who play a leading role in the region, they might also dictate the regional architecture and we might facilitate with their interest. And whatever is happening in Eurasian region, my dear friend, if you look at the entire regional security architecture of Eurasia is either guided by Russia or guided by China, or simply they are guided by both in partnership, and entire Central Asian countries are putting themselves into the trap of the Sino-Russian partnership as far as the regional security architecture in Eurasia is concerned. My dear friend, since you understood or I've created a background about regionalism and regional security architecture, I must tell you it is around 2015. There is a fellow called Trusky who has focused more on the Eurasian regional security architecture, isn't it? In the line of Berry Buzan and Ole Weber. And to be frank, the regional security architecture was first created in 1983 by Berry Buzan, and his case of analysis as far as regional security architecture was concerned was South Asia. He has focused his entire study on South Asia and he made South Asia at the center of its regional security architecture because whatever the South Asia region was characterizing was dissimilar to the other regional security architecture. Similarly, Trotsky in 2015 made a vivid study of the Eurasian security architecture and came to its conclusion that the Asian security architecture, like the South Asian architecture, is dissimilar to any regional security architecture that you can find anywhere in the world. But my dear friend, since I have told you about the regionalism, and I'm to say the security architecture, I must well start with two things. The first is that how China is an important actor in the this thing Eurasian security architecture, and how Russia plays an important role in the Eurasian architecture, and similarly with the Russia China role in Eurasian architecture, we will try to map how far India is playing an important role in the Eurasian security architecture, isn't it? But well before that, let me tell you a bit about the Eurasian security architecture. I mean, my dear friend, being from Eurasia, you all might be well versed with the Eurasian security architecture. But as far as my study goes, or as far as my understanding as a student of international politics goes, I believe the Eurasian security system began to develop only after the restructuring of the globe with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. I mean to say, the entire Eurasian security architecture is developed in the post Cold War period only after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. During the following decades, what we have seen, China and Russia, they developed at their own pace mutually a kind of homogeneous set of security, threats and interests. And later on, particularly after 2014, what we have seen, this interest, which were largely Sinocentric or which were largely Russocentric, has converged to establish the Eurasian security system. In Eurasia, it is no longer the Chinese, I mean to say, interest, or it's no longer the Russian interest. They have come up with a partnership called Sino-Russian interest, and putting this Sino-Russian interest at center, they developed the Eurasian security system where the countries of Central Asia are only members, whereas Russia and China are the joint bosses. They are the hegemonic stabilizers, rather to say. They are the hegemonic stabilizers, both Russia and China, isn't it? In the early period, Russia has been the hegemonic stabilizer. Now China has been the hegemonic stabilizer. If you look at when Russia was just, hegemonic stabilizer, China was seeing Russia with a kind of enmity. China was not in a position to tolerate Russia. But the moment China realized that without Russia, China cannot play a leading role in Central Asia, then it took Russia into confidence, became the junior partner of Russia, isn't it? And that has allowed China to have a greater space in Central Asia without any kind of objection from the Russian side. And with Russian support, China get an easy access into Central Asia. That is what I'm, proposing to my Indian thinkers as well, to the policymakers. Whenever we are coming with an Indian policy in Central Asia, India must take Russia into confidence. Because even today, whatever may be the economic clout of Russia in Central Asia, but without Russia or bypassing Russia, no third country can play a larger role in Russia, Central Asia. So that's the reason probably why I am proposing a viewpoint that India, instead of going alone or having a go alone approach, must need to develop a kind of approach where it has to take Russia along with it into Central Asia. Then only countries like not countries here, the leader comes, isn't it? The president and prime minister of different countries, those who guide their policy with the advice of Putin or Xi Jinping, isn't it? They will come into confidence. So what I was telling you, that after 2014, what we have seen, now the interest, the threat perception, security issues of both Russia and China, they converged into together and developed a new system to which we call as the new Eurasian security system. Isn't it, my dear friend? The set of set threats and converging interest that establishes a security system can very broadly and actually, can be identified, isn't it, with certain empirical challenges. If you look at with the Eurasian system, the following core set of four threads, which I have categorized, you may agree with me or disagree with me, isn't it? There are four categories of threats or interest which can be observed from the new Eurasian security system is largely following into the four categories. The first, my dear friend, of course, is the US has been seen as the primary and potentially existential security threats to the region. Isn't it? US has been proposed as the primary and existential threat to the region. And if you can look at, you will agree with me as well. From 1991, particularly after 1995, if you look at the policy orientation of both China and Russia, these are largely anti-US policies. And somewhere this anti-US policy by Russia or anti-US policy by China converged together and they became an Eurasian policy which is anti-US in nature. So they think US to be the primary and the potential existential threat for the region. Second is the domestic threats emerging from the contested territories like Chechnya for Russia and of course Xinjiang and Tibet for China. Now they have converged together. That means now whatever is a threat for Russia is a threat for China as well, and whatever is a threat for China is a threat for Russia as well. That is what I believe is a convergence of threat, isn't it? And if you look at these two countries, also they have a similar kind of ideological opposition as well, isn't it? I mean to say, whoever opposes Putin cannot see in the sunlight the next day. Same is true with this Xi Jinping as well. I mean to say, the ideological opposition can also have similar kind of security response as well. The third is the lost empires. My dear friend, if you look at this third proposition, the lost empire is a kind of project which deals with the restoration of the greater Russia or the Russian world concept, isn't it? The Russia-Ukraine war which is taking place now have to be seen in that perspective. What Russia is doing there is to restore the Russian world. Russia believes that Ukraine is very much part of the geopolitical orbit of Russia. Therefore, it cannot join European Union. or it cannot independently decide its own fate. It has to decide, or it has to do whatever it wants to do only with the aid, advice, and dictation of Russia. The same is also true with China if you look at. There is a concept called Chinese dream. And if you see that Chinese dream, the idea of Chinese dream again draws heavily from this lost empire idea. What China says, taking clue from history, China wants to annex the neighboring region and integrate it to its main empire. If you look at, it has taken heavily from the Central Asian countries as well. The Central Asian countries, those who are bordering with China, after 1991, they have exchanged, huge portion of their territories with China. Tell me how many countries they have got territories from China? None of them. Whereas China took heavily territories from Central Asia, citing historical examples. When it comes to China's dealing with other neighbors, the 14 neighbors that it has the same history of salami slicing, that it takes, their bit of land. And even yesterday, the border confrontation that we had in Indian side, I mean to say, the Indo-China border conflict, now, the disengagement started, has to be seen in that perspective as well. But what I'm telling you is both China and Russia, they have their own worldviews. Of course, every country has its one own worldview. India has its own worldview as well. But their worldviews are very adventurous. Russia wants to restore its own Russian world. That means it wants to annex those countries who do not, go with them, or do not, reconcile with their ideas. The same is true with China. China wants to take away Taiwan. China wants to dominate over Xinjiang. Taiwan wants to take entire Eastern Turkestan, Inner Mongolia. I mean to say, if you look, my dear friend, the half of Chinese empire is annexed. They have annexed territories from here and there to establish their own sort of things. And they wanted to bring those lost empires, which even today is not part of them. And of course, Taiwan is their central focus. Tell me, my dear friend, if you look other way around, in Eurasia, a new security complex has been developed where Taiwan, which lives in Indo-Pacific, is the mainstay of Chinese policy in Eurasia. Chechnya, which is not part of Central Asia, remains the mainstay of Russia's Eurasian policy in Eurasia, isn't it? In such a manner, the way both Russia and China have come together to, create a kind of new security system in Eurasia, focusing, Ukraine for Russia and Taiwan for China, seems some kind of, a dangerous democratic alternative for me, isn't it? Of course, the fourth, we will, debate on that, because I am opening the umbrella in front of you, putting forth lot many ideas, isn't it? Let's look at the fourth, concern here. The fourth concern, of course, my dear friend, is concern on information and cyber security. That means the information warfare that is taking place, or the digital security thing, or the digital world that we live in, isn't it? How they impact the security architecture of each other also matters. But to be precise again, isn't it? Let me put those in again needs in nutshell. The US for both China and Russia represents a meta threat, which is interlinked with all I have said so far. Within the domain of domestic threat, if you see, my dear friend, the US is seen as a menacing actor, pushing color revolution and penetrating the information domain of both the states. Both China and Russia, they blame US for the color revolution that are taking place around, In fact, India blames US for the revolution that has taken place in Bangladesh as well, the regime change that has taken place. I do not say that US is a saint. It does involve in color revolution. But both for Russia and China, isn't it? It is a meta threat, because they believe in the cyber domain, and also when it comes to the neighboring countries, where US has stage managed many color revolutions, isn't it? Can also be exhibited in Eurasia. That is the reason Russia and China have come together to avoid any such color revolution taking place in the Eurasian region. Of course, we have seen in 2007, 2004, color revolutions taking place in Kyrgyzstan, isn't it? We have seen, revolutions in Georgia. Of course, Ukraine, the tulip revolution we have seen, the rose revolution that we have seen, Ukraine is a case in point, isn't it? Yeah, of course, many color revolutions are there. The Arab Spring that is there, Isn't it up, in the name of democracy and human right, the US is advancing them altogether. But irrespective of what they do, isn't it? The what I want to say is that the way US is handling them, the way US is, I mean to say, militarily penetrating into those territories, isn't it? Particularly if you look at the role of US in the Middle East, isn't it? In the Gulf, what US did, isn't it? It has unconditionally put forth its support for Israel, isn't it? And come up with whatever required to support Israel to install a regime there, isn't it? Similarly, its support to Saudi Arab and its opposition to Iran and creating a conflict zone between the two. If you look, the way, then one can realize that it's not easy to handle a US when it interferes in the region which is external to it or in a region which is inimical to it. I mean to say, Russia interferes in both the region, which is inimical and I mean to say enmity both. In both the cases, America interferes. If you look at the case of Middle East, it has interfered because it is enmity with Iran, but it also has interfered because it is friendship with Israel and countries like Saudi Arabia as well, isn't it? What I mean to say, if you look at, I mean to say, the threats that comes from US for China and Russia in the Eurasian region in particularly can be called as a shared threats and interest, isn't it? And this shared threats and interest, but not fully in place until 1991, isn't it? Until 1991, neither Russia nor China was taking US seriously. But it is only after 1991 with the collapse of Soviet Union, isn't it? Both the countries they started to realize, isn't it, that US is their main threat, isn't it? And these threats need to be eliminated. Let's see how these threats and interest against US by both Russia and China have evolved in both states and how they finally converged to establish the Eurasian security system sometimes around 2014. Let's look, my dear friend, our first point within the second parameter, the Chinese role in the Eurasian regional security complex. If you look at, my dear friend, and you all will agree with me, the end of Cold War in 1991 has caused a tectonic shift in the Chinese regional security architecture. And with the collapse of Soviet Union, if you see, the US has rapidly replaced the Soviet as China's most urgent security challenge. Isn't it? If you look at the report of Strobe Talbot, isn't it? The then, Secretary of State, he told that Russia is not a security threat to Russia, America anymore. The threat all emanates from Beijing, isn't it? Can well challenge the US hegemony in the world politics. That means right after 1991, the Talbot report itself is a kind of testimony to the fact that China is a growing security threat or challenge for the United States of America. But similarly, the statesmen in China, they were also visualizing America to be the urgent security threat, isn't it? As far as, I mean to say, China's policy in Asia is concerned. And particularly, if you look at the disintegration of Soviet Union, which is coincided with the Gulf War of 1991 and 92, in which the US demonstrated not only in its incredible new military capabilities, but also, my dear friend, its increasing willingness for the use of the military options in entrenching its liberal new world order, isn't it? Can well be witnessed by China and Russia both. The possibility of a US intervention into the Chinese sphere of interest became more acute for Beijing. In China, the US was seen as a comprehensive threat with serious security, military, and ideological dimensions. Besides its mighty military capabilities, the US was seen as a clandestinely promoting its liberal values, particularly democracy and human rights, which are unknown to the Chinese empire, isn't it? I mean to say, through peaceful evolution, which, I mean to say, whether you call them as I mean, it is human rights movements, whether you call them as democratic movements, whether you call them as popular unrest, these peaceful evolutions, which we can see in, Hong Kong as well, few years back during the COVID-19 period, isn't it? Or whatever is taking place within Taiwan, isn't it? Or in mainland China. China was very furious and, distrustful about the US intention towards China, isn't it? And the evolution of Shanghai 5 in Central Asia in 1995 and 96. Then thereafter, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization since 2001, my dear friend, should be seen in this premise of Chinese penetration into the Eurasian security architecture, keeping its security concerns in mind from the US invasion. Isn't it? Further, the launch of Belt and Road Initiative under the premise of Silk Road by Xi Jinping in 2013, none other than the Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan in Astana, isn't it? Is a step forward to cement its position in the regional security architecture of Eurasia, to sideline any American adventure in the region. My dear friend, if you look at in the I mean to say under the regime of Xi Jinping, what we have seen, the position of Communist Party in particularly has been cemented since 2001. They have removed their enemies, particularly the opposition forces. They were there in domestic front. Therefore, they became free from domestic compulsion, isn't it? Then they started to raise their security environment, isn't it? And with enhancing security environment, we can see a more assertive China towards 2019, isn't it? And overall, if you look at this grand strategy, Xi Jinping's grand strategy was more or less focused towards securing China's main global challenge with the US as its principal object of attention. Why? What I mean to say, that US has always remained in the focal point of Chinese policy, and they believed that their main target is America. Yeah, initially they thought Russia to be their enemy as well, but since America has taken the back seat, Russia has been pushed back, and particularly under Putin, the kind of bonhomie both China and Russia have created, now they became partners, isn't it? Partners of, in crime against the Russia, against US. I mean to say, Russia and China became partners, and now their main target has been the United States of America. Instead, for Xi Jinping, my dear friend, Russia is no longer a competitor. Rather, it is increasingly be seen as a strategic asset to be tapped into the competition with the US if the competition with the US intensifies in near future, isn't it? But same is also true with Russia as well. For that, we need to see what kind of role Russia plays in the Eurasian regional security architecture. Like my dear friend, the way Chinese security architecture has visualized US as its sole enemy, similar thing can also be visualized after the end of Soviet, I mean to say the end of Soviet Union, or the end of, I mean to say Soviet regime, isn't it? Has created a state of flux, isn't it? In Russian security thinking. And what we have seen, the US became for a short time a partner with the United States of America instead of being an enemy. If we can look at, isn't it, the initial periods, what we have seen when Boris Yeltsin was there, the president of Russia, we have seen there is a kind of close proximity between Russia and US. That's a different thing, that Boris Yeltsin expected something from America which America never given him, isn't it? Then what we have seen, my dear friend, uh, America's main intent, I mean to say Russia's main intention was towards ending internal threat, poverty, corruption, ethnic tension. These were the issues which largely occupied the central focus point of Russia, and Russia wanted to elevate them, isn't it? And it's never entered into that great power rivalry with US initially. But what we have seen after the first Chechen War of 1994-1996, isn't it? Then with the slow but steady fragmentation of Russian federations and neighbors becoming enemies, particularly the case of Georgia, if you can say it, isn't it? And the US involvement in, the Russian sphere of influence, the expansion of NATO, and particularly, especially, the US and NATO's involvement in the Yugoslavian War of 1990s has created some kind of animosity between the West and Russia that has lasted even today. And if you see in Russian security perception, the US again became a great power rival. The US became a villain and bent on the destruction and at least weakening of Russia. Russia now believes that US is hell-bent to weaken Russia or to outdo Russia from the international system. Therefore, from the Russian point of view, the US fermented color revolution in post-Soviet countries and penetrated Russia's sphere of interest by establishing a military presence just not in Central Asia, in many of the Eurasian region in the early 2000s. The threat posed by the US fluctuated until about 2011-12, and after which, for multiple reasons, my dear friend, the relation between the two great powers undertook a turn for the worse. That means whatever smoothness was there in the relationship, isn't it? But after 2011-2012, because of incessant interference of US in the sphere of influence of Russia, the relation became worse between the two superpowers. After acute internal threat has been pacified, what we have seen, Kremlin started to worry about its own lost empires, isn't it? Propagandists and ideologists, propagandists, those who are forwarding the Russian worldviews, and ideologists, and eventually even Vladimir Putin himself started to demand the gathering of Russian lands, isn't it? In the same Chinese line. I mean, this is the deepening relationship of Georgia, Ukraine, and other post-Soviet countries towards the EU and NATO was seen by Putin and his courtiers as a threat to Russia and its new imperialist ambitions. Russia perceived both European Union and NATO as US tool in the ever continuing great power struggle, my dear friend. Many of you may not disagree with, may not agree with me. You may disagree with me, but this is true that the deepening relationship of Georgia, Ukraine, and many of the post-Soviet countries that became a kind of reckoning in Putin's policy, and from there onward, isn't it? Putin took it as a great power struggle with the US, EU, and NATO, isn't it? And these are the reasons, that which has led Russia to war between Georgia and Ukraine. The 2000 Georgia war and 2014 and 2022 Ukraine war has to be seen in those perspectives. You may agree or you disagree, but this is true that in order to restore the lost empires of Russia, Russia has fought with its host brothers, Georgia in 2008 and Ukraine in 2014 and 2022. Isn't it? And the formation of CSTO, my dear friend, isn't it? Recently, I published a book on that, Security Integration in Post-Soviet Space and Roadmap for Future Cooperation from Palgrave Macmillan. And there also, I have mentioned it, that CSTO is nothing but a kind of Russian check to any kind of foreign interference in the Eurasian region, isn't it? And the Eurasian Economic Union, if you want to see, both CSTO and Eurasian Economic Union has to be seen in this light. Moscow wants to actualize its interest, keeping the US away from the geopolitical orbit in which Eurasia is an important constituent, my dear friend. Isn't it? And when you see Russia, China, and their role in creating a common security, Eurasian security system, there, what invites more interest is the role of India therein. My dear friend, of course, Russia is a great friend of India, but China is a rival of India. Even today, we compete more than cooperate in many of the domains. Therefore, I doubt that without taking China into confidence, India can play any larger role in the security architecture of Central Asia or Eurasia. And to be frank, Russia will not also agree to upset China by giving India more leeway in Central Asia so that China can be balanced. But as you understood, this is the nature of struggle for power. That many a time what countries they do, instead of being friends, in spite of being friends, they allow the competitor of the partner to play a larger role so that they can draw a balance, if not directly but indirectly. And what I can see that the role India is playing in Central Asia has somehow the confidence of Russia within it as well. It is only under the, information of Russia, isn't it? It is only under the concept of Russia, India is playing some sort of role in Eurasia through which Russia wants to balance with China. And if you look at the way in recent years, India has played a role after being the full member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we can visualize that in near future, like any other dominant country there in Central Asia, India will also emerge as a leading power. But unlike China and Russia, its nature would be different. I mean to say, a stable, democratically established country with a cultural heritage, a country known for peaceful coexistence, Panchashit, a country known to have universal brotherhood, a country with democratic culture, isn't it? What it can offer to Central Asia is altogether a different paradigm. My dear friend, the other day I was reading, there was a mention that the entire security framework of the world has to be changed. What we have seen, isn't it? Going beyond Eurasia, what we have seen, the entire security architecture of the world is either dominated by the US or dominated by the China or dominated by Russia, isn't it? And this domination of Russia, China, and America is called as a security system of the world. And if you look at, forget China because forget you Russia because Russia is having its own worries. It is struggling with its own economic woes at home and the war with Ukraine. Let's take the US China as an example, as a hegemonic stabilizer. My dear friend, if you look at both the current superpowers, the US and China, what we have seen, both of them are not fit to lead, isn't it? And of course, Russia is beset with its own needs. If you look at the case of China, my dear friend, you will agree with me. China is a bully, isn't it? The words I use may not sound good to you, but it's a fact. China is a bully. It is not a responsible power and has threatened almost all its neighbors. And the US is actually an overgrown island and largely irrelevant to the new economic centers of the world, which is Eurasia. Russia, of course, is overburdened with its own economic woes and numerous wars it has fought with its own erstwhile brothers. In such a situation, if any alternative that we can expect only can come from the land of Buddha, the country of Gandhi, my dear friend India, a land known for Vishwamitra, universal brotherhood, and believes in two democratic culture of live and let live and peaceful coexistence. A only country which has never threatened any country, never annexed any country, never waged war against any country from its own side past, and is known for its own democratic ethos and values of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one world, one family. That means it believes that the world is our family. Unlike the Chinese philosophy that the world is centering around China, China is the middle kingdom, and anything happens around the world is happening for China, isn't it? We believe that there is a philosophy of coexistence. India exists, and at the same time, other countries around East also does exist. That is our philosophy. But my dear friend, in spite of this hoary past cultural heritage and philosophical enrichment, India's engagement with Central Asia has not been that great, isn't it? I mean to say, if you look at India's engagement with Central Asia and members of Eurasia, has largely been cordial, friendly, and benevolent, but only recent. These all have only started recently. India's policy largely governed by Loknath policy, Connect Central Asia policy, reconnecting with the region, Delhi Declaration, which recently held in 2022, India Central Asia Summit, and their effective formalization definitely gives a way for India's greater role in Central Asia, which can, address the issues and concerns of both the region. But it is still very early days for India in its new avatar in Eurasian security complex, and as the time progresses, we can visualize how both the actors can come together to meet each other in interest amicably in both Eurasian security landscape, isn't it? With this assumption, I believe that only India can involve in the security architecture of Central Asia. It can have a larger role in the new Eurasian security architecture. But as far as India's involvement in the region is concerned, these are largely driven by pharmaceutical, energy, soft power domains, and India's cultural connection with the Central Asian region. And whatever else we are doing through Kremlin. I mean to say, Russia has been a kind of, I mean to say, advisor there, or whatever is happening in the Eurasian security system is largely hegemonized, dominated and dictated by Russia and China only. With this assumption that India will play a larger role in coming days in Central Asia, particularly in the security architecture, I would stop here with an anticipation that this lecture would be a food for thought for the young minds working on regional security complex both in Eurasia and elsewhere in the world. And I believe these young minds, if you can take the entire theoretical premises that I put forth before you, isn't it? How the regional security complexes are developed. Many a time, look, in the entire lecture, I have not reflected any concerns of Central Asia. However, the Eurasian security system was dictated by the security concerns of China and Russia, but named it as a Eurasian security structure or architecture. Are you getting my viewpoint? I mean to say, your security has been determined by the security of Russia or China, or rather to say some other countries, rather than your own worries, own issues, and own threats or own challenges. The entire Eurasian security system has to be seen from that perspective. If you want an alternative perspective from Russia and China, then you have to engage extra regional powers or proximate neighbors like India so that you can evolve a new security, Eurasian security system beyond the security architecture of Russia and China. With this, I once again thanks Akbotaji and the friends from Eurasia and hope you will have a very, I mean to say, fruitful interaction as well after this lecture. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ramji. Actually, I was, while listening to your lecture, I was remembering all the years of growth that we passed together and separately, but simultaneously. And I was actually thinking, and I'm still very, very grateful that you are among those of my friends who is not only a brilliant scholar, but an educator. Never in my life I saw such a professor as when I came back there to Fakir Mohan University, where so much love was surrounding you by your very bright, amazing, beautiful students. And each of them, like, remember that there were not many students who even know what Central Asia is because there were no such courses there. But you,
Yeah.
being such an educator, made them know it was not in their study program, but they already had the will to know our region. And I'm so grateful to you for that. Later on,
Thank
I met another professors, Indian professor, great ones, do the same thing. Anuragji,
Okay, great.
another friend of us, and
Yeah.
Punitji, but who actually serve not to the Indian students and Indian science, but to Kazakhstani one. So we cannot call him an Indian professor because he's a Kazakh. But you know what important you are doing? You are the bridge between our great countries, and we cannot say our civilizations because we do belong to the same civilization. But
Thank you.
you are a great bridge. Remember, back at the beginning of this millennium, it was something like a fairy tale saying that is needed in our energy sector. Without India's presence, energy sector of Central Asia will have certain holes which are needed to be filled. And you were one of those scholars who were telling about this. You are another scholar actually is not a propaganda, but I would say it is again opening a door to a great Indian personalities. We were discussing with the student of the first year about Indian personalities that we not necessarily all of them we know, like Netaji.
Netaji Subhash Bose. Yeah.
Netaji yeah, despite being seen as a quite controversial figure at this part of the world, he did great things. Like he had great ideas.
Of course.
But you taught me one thing, great thing, that you always give the floor to your students and you educate your students to be as good as you are. So I would like to give the floor to one of my beloved and brilliant students, Amina, because I live on the 13th floor, so connection is not always good. So Amina will summarize your lecture for the other listeners because she was taking notes, and also she
Share
will
the
give the
record if you have recorded.
yeah, they recorded, and also she will store for the Q&A session for our brilliant young colleagues. Thank you so much, Ram.
And
You are one of my most beloved brothers.
yeah, my request is you bring Amina with you while you come here to Harvard
We
University.
should, yeah, we should, we should take her. We should
Please
really.
proceed with the introduction.
So, Amina, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So, to conclude today's session on India in Eurasian security architecture, I would like to conclude or summarize the information. But before this, I would like to extend.
Amina, can I break you? I just wanted to say that not only students of Guru Ghasidas universities are here, but we see our young colleague from Christ University, Lakshmi Karlikar is here, another great young scholar who is doing her research on Kazakhstan. So I'm so grateful to Christ University as well to support all the initiatives.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the recognition.
So, okay, thank you very much. Well, from the behalf of the students, I would like to express that we extend our heartfelt gratitude to you, Professor, and for sharing your valuable insights and also valuable expertise. So your lecture has shed light on India's role and strategic approaches within the involving Eurasian security framework. And also, not only about India, you mentioned during this lecture, we also find out that the Chinese and Russian role in the Eurasian region also important. For example, they could be us, not only us in ally, as we usually think, because of the different treaties between China and Russia, which always declare the friendship between these two countries and the mutual enemy in the face of the United States of America, but also this mutual interest of major powers like Russia and China can sometimes clash, sometimes complicating unified responses to regional crises. And also, they sometimes could be seen as the competitive powers in the Eurasian security area. Also, you mentioned the regional security complex architecture, which is an interesting topic to discuss because the cooperation among the states within a specific region to address security challenge collectively is a major area for researchers, for not only the young scholars researchers, but also the researchers of the professionals. And these concepts gained prominence in recent years. And it was seen during your lecture that you mentioned the Eurasian as so the Eurasian security system developed after collapse of the USSR, which is also important after 1991. The China and Russia have mutual interests in the Eurasian. And China right now we see is hegemonic stabilizer in the face of the China, and Russia was from the forming time, the hegemonic stabilizer in this region. Also interesting to mention that after 2014, Russia and China have a new developed the new Eurasian security system because of the United States, a new player in this region. Also, when you told us about the disputes between the Russia and Georgia and the war between the Russia and Ukraine, it shows the new perspective for Russian hegemonic regime. And also, China had the same problems with the Taiwanese, the big dispute, the prioritized problem for Chinese government. And also, I would like to mention the Indian role in this region, because not only, as we know from the title of this lecture, the India has plays a pivotal role in the new Eurasian security architecture, with aims to address the complex security challenges between the countries, between the region, like Central Asia, for example, and South Asia, through the enhanced cooperation and dialogue. You also mentioned the philosophy of India, a philosophy of mutual coexistence between the states, which is important because compared with the Chinese philosophy, it's like the one hegemony that China plays the major role in the policy of Chinese government. The China is the center of the region, in the center of the world. We said that India had different perspectives, that developed different perspectives. So the perspectives also, if we talk about this, between China and Russia were mentioned in this lecture, that they had also main target, as I mentioned before, against the United States of America, because the United States influence in this region also a price with lots of different sides. For example, the side of the resources, the side of the geographical territories, and the side of the logistic in the region. So that's, I think, the main points. And I can conclude that so the role and strategic approaches of such countries as Russia, China, and India plays a pivotal role in Eurasian security framework, I would say. And also, we enhancing during this lecture our understanding of international relations, and not only international relations, but also geopolitical or geopolitical strategy, I would say, like this. So we look forward to continuing discussion and further collaboration in exploring these crucial global issues. Thank you, Professor, so much. Thank you, all participants, for joining us today. And if our participants have some questions, the floor is yours. You're free to express yourself. I think everything was clear, but if someone has questions, the participants could contact me anytime, and we will discuss it, and I will share these questions with you, Professor. And so I think we can conclude and finish our conference lecture. Thank
maybe,
you.
yeah, we can, Amina, we can conclude, but maybe Lakshmi is here. She just recently visited Kazakhstan, and she's finalizing she submitted actually her PhD thesis on Kazakhstan. Maybe she has something to say. I don't know, maybe some other students. We have so many beautiful Indian students here as well. Maybe, I don't know. Let us give floor to them if they would like to share something.
Sir, first of all, thank you so much for the insightful lecture. In fact, when I came to Kazakhstan, I was staying in Akbokta ma'am's house, and she had suggested me to read your work, and I'd quoted a lot of your works from a Routledge publication in my thesis. So it's really glad that I've got an opportunity to interact with you. So thank you, Agbokta ma'am, for giving me this opportunity. And sir, I'm also working in energy relations. I'm working
Okay.
on the new great game phenomena, which is United States and Chinese energy competition in Central Asia. So your lecture today delivered a lot of insights for me. So I'm really grateful for that, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Lakshmi. Glad to know that you are my, that what you can say, invisible friend then. Okay. But anyway, great to know that young scholars are following our work and they believe that our works are good enough for, future research as well. And
Yes.
thank you. Anytime you like, you can contact me with regard to any kind of project with, energy cooperation between India, Central Asia and China. Okay. And I would be
Definitely.
happy to, yeah. Thank you. Lakshmi. Thank
Yes, sir.
you. Anyone else, Amina?
I think that's it. We have another conference in 5 minutes. So
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Ramji, the other conference or lecture, Amina is referring is another friend of yours lecture. Irfan is going to give his perspective.
Irfan is giving? Irfan is giving?
Irfan, yeah.
On what?
On
what?
Pakistani vision on Eurasian security
Okay.
architecture.
No issue. I treat
So
all
actually,
Pakistanis as my brother.
so all those students who joined
Okay,
to the
convey my
next
love
session,
and affection to Irfan as well.
we
Take,
will.
take. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you so much.
thank
Namaste.
you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.